Level 1. Flawed precursor serums. The story begins not with a triumph, but with a warning written across a man's face. In 1940, Dr. Abraham Erskine was developing the first prototype of the super soldier serum under Hydra. The formula wasn't ready. Johann Schmidt didn't care. He forced Erskine to administer the incomplete version anyway, demanding power he hadn't earned from a science that wasn't finished. The serum worked, in a manner of speaking. Schmidt gained enhanced strength, speed, and durability. But the incomplete formula reacted violently with something already inside him. His face collapsed, the skin pulled tight across his skull. Johann Schmidt became the Red Skull.
We have left humanity behind. And like you, I embrace it proudly.
Not because the serum failed, because it worked exactly the way an untested formula works on a man already consumed by cruelty. On paper, it was a breakthrough. On a human body, it was a death sentence. Erskine explained the flaw plainly. The serum amplifies everything inside. Good becomes great. Evil becomes catastrophic.
The serum amplifies everything that is inside, so good becomes great. Bad becomes worse.
Schmidt was already a monster before the injection. The serum just made it impossible to look away. Erskine fled Germany. He brought his research to America. And in 1943, he found a test subject so different from Schmidt that it was almost a philosophical argument. A scrawny kid from Brooklyn, 5'4", rejected from military service 4 times. Steve Rogers. On the night of his injection, Rogers stepped into a chamber that looked more like science fiction than military hardware. Howard Stark operated the equipment. Peggy Carter watched from the control room. Erskine administered the perfected formula, the version that corrected everything that destroyed Schmidt.
Shut it down!
Shut it down!
Kill the reactor, Mr. Stark! Turn it off! Kill the reactor!
Rogers walked in small. He walked out changed, not just physically. The serum amplified what was already there, and Rogers had the one thing Schmidt never possessed: goodness. Here's what most people miss. Captain America exists because the Red Skull happened first. One incomplete formula forced on a man who demanded power without character. One perfected formula given to a volunteer who asked only for a chance to serve. Schmidt's face was the warning. Rogers' body was the proof. But proof only breeds ambition. Once the world saw what a super soldier could do, nobody wanted to study the science anymore. They wanted to reproduce it. And 60 years later, that obsession would produce something far more dangerous than the Red Skull. Level 2. Military-industrial human experimentation. 60 years after Steve Rogers vanished into the Arctic ice, the American military was still trying to recreate what Erskine built. The problem? Erskine died minutes after injecting Rogers. He took the perfected formula with him. Every attempt since has been a reconstruction, a guess, a copy of a copy. In 2002, General Thaddeus Ross launched the Army Biochemical Strength Enhancement Project. The goal was simple: rebuild the super soldier serum from scratch. The method was deceptive from day one. Ross ran 2 parallel teams, each kept in the dark about the other's true purpose. One team, led by Bruce Banner and Betty Ross, the general's own daughter, studied anti-radiation cells. They believed they were developing treatments for radiation poisoning.
No. Shut that off! Here, turn it off!
The other team worked directly on serum reconstruction. Neither Banner nor Betty understood their research was being funneled into weapons development. They thought they were saving lives. They weren't. Banner's team discovered something unexpected. The anti-radiation cells they were studying didn't just block gamma rays. They absorbed and converted them. Banner documented everything. Convinced he was on the edge of a medical breakthrough. He wasn't. He was on the verge of becoming a myth. Ross ordered Banner to combine both research threads, serum, and gamma radiation. Supercharge the formula. Create a soldier who could withstand anything. On a date fans have pieced together from background details in The Incredible Hulk, Banner injected himself with the combination. He wasn't ordered to. He volunteered. Let that sink in. The scientist who believed he was curing disease became the first human test subject because he trusted his own work. Instead, he became the Hulk.
Now she'll see.
When Banner woke up, the laboratory was destroyed. Equipment scattered. Walls cracked. He had no memory, just fragments. Green, rage, running. He went to find Betty. General Ross was already there, watching from the corner. When Banner tried to leave, the military moved to detain him. He transformed again. And then he ran not to escape justice, but because he understood what staying would cost the people around him. The 1st of February 2006, Ross made a decision that would haunt the MCU for years. He didn't destroy the serum, he hid it. He told the press samples were destroyed. He told Congress the research was inconclusive. He lied to everyone. He preserved enough serum to keep experimenting in secret. Emil Blonsky received that serum months later. He became the abomination. That choice, hiding the formula instead of destroying it, is the single most consequential act of scientific misconduct in the entire MCU. But here's the question nobody asks. Why didn't Ross just stop? The serum had failed. Banner was gone. The project was a disaster. So why keep the samples alive? Because Ross knew what the Red Skull knew, and what Erskine knew, and what every scientist on this list learned the hard way. The serum works. It just needs the right test subject.
You don't deserve this power. Now what's your death?
Level 3. Involuntary field experimentation. Level 3 is where the test subject never raises their hand, where the experiment happens to someone rather than being chosen by them. And no origin in the MCU captures that more completely than a cave in Afghanistan. May 2008, Tony Stark was demonstrating weapons for the US military. On the return journey, his convoy was ambushed. He woke up in a cave with an electromagnet attached to his chest, keeping shrapnel from reaching his heart. His captors, the 10 Rings, wanted a missile. Stark had one realistic option: comply or die. Remove the electromagnet. The shrapnel moves. The shrapnel moves. The heart stops.
He says they have everything you need to build the Jericho missile. He wants you to make the list of materials.
He didn't build a missile. In that cave, using salvaged parts from a Stark Industries weapons chest, with a dying scientist named Yinsen as his only ally, Stark built something no military program had funded and no laboratory had conceived. An arc reactor to power his own chest. A suit of armor to carry him out. He did not volunteer to become Iron Man. He was forced to survive. And survival, in that cave, required him to become something the world had never seen. Yinsen died so Stark could escape. That detail never leaves the character. Every suit Tony builds afterward, every system designed to protect people who cannot protect themselves, it all traces back to a man who gave his life in a cave so someone else could make it out. The transformation forced on Stark became the engine of everything he built for the rest of his life. Here is the distinction that defines Level 3. Schmidt demanded his transformation at Level 1, that was ambition. Rogers volunteered, that was service. Stark had transformation imposed by circumstances that left him no alternative. That is the specific category. Level 3 captures science that happens to you, not science you choose. The scar was an arc reactor bolted into his sternum. The outcome was Iron Man. The cost was Yinsen. Those 3 facts cannot be separated from each other. Which raises a darker question. What happens when the scientist stops reacting to a crisis and starts creating one deliberately, not for a general, not for a government, but for profit? What happens when a man decides to redesign human biology and sell the upgrade? That is Level 4. Level 4. Scientific hubris and DIY evolution. Level 4 is where a scientist stops trying to build a better weapon and starts trying to build a better human, starting with himself. In Iron Man 3, we meet Aldrich Killian at his lowest point. New Year's Eve, 1999. Physically disabled, ignored by Tony Stark at a conference in Bern. Left waiting on a rooftop that Tony never came back to. In that moment, Killian made a decision. Not to accept the body he had, but to design a better one. By 2012, the transformation was complete. Killian, running a private think tank called Advanced Idea Mechanics, had commercialized a biology rewriting virus called Extremis.
Now, Extremis harnesses our bioelectrical potential, and it goes here.
developed in its early stages by a biologist named Maya Hansen. Extremis didn't enhance the body the way a serum does. It didn't boost existing muscle or bone structure. It rewrote the biological code entirely. Subjects given Extremis regenerated damaged tissue in real time, produced intense heat from within, and developed physical capabilities that placed them well above anything a conventional serum had achieved. Killian administered Extremis to himself. The disability was gone. His body became the product's own advertisement. But here is the cost of that hubris. Extremis was unstable. Subjects who couldn't sustain the upgrade didn't degrade. They overheated. They exploded. AIM's solution was not to refine the formula. It was to classify the failures as acceptable casualties and continue distribution. The science worked. The oversight did not exist. And Killian knew both of those facts when he kept injecting people. In Iron Man 3, Pepper Potts is forcibly injected with Extremis against her will, a direct echo of Level 3, now inside a program with global commercial ambitions. Tony Stark eventually developed a cure. Extremis could be reversed, which means Level 4, unlike what follows, still had an exit. Level 5 has none. Level 5 is where the change becomes permanent, the scientist becomes a fugitive, and the experiment never ends. Level 5. Genetic mutation and permanent transformation. Every experiment below Level 5 contains, somewhere, a theoretical exit. Chemical dependencies fade, military programs shut down, even a cave in Afghanistan had a way out. Extremis had a cure. Level 5 is where those exits disappear. The Incredible Hulk never shows Banner's original transformation in full. It opens with him already in Brazil, already practicing breathing exercises in a small apartment, keeping his heart rate low enough to stay human. The origin is compressed into a title sequence, but what it implies is devastating. Banner volunteered. He believed combining gamma radiation with an experimental serum would create a cellular defense against radiation poisoning. He thought he was saving lives. He sat in the chamber. He injected himself. The dials went past every safety limit. The Hulk was not a transformation. It was an explosion locked inside a human body. One choice, one injection, one moment of trusting the science. And Bruce Banner became a fugitive from his own biology, unable to be sedated by conventional medicine, unable to be contained by conventional means, unable to simply stop. But Level 5 belongs equally to a man the MCU buried for decades before finally putting him on screen. Isaiah Bradley, a black soldier given an early version of the super soldier serum in the 1950s. He served in Korea. He was captured. He fought his way out of a prison camp single-handedly. He came home, and then his own government imprisoned him for 30 years studying what the serum had done to his body, erasing the evidence he had ever existed, ensuring the experiment stayed quiet.
For the next 30 years, they experimented on me, trying to figure out why the serum worked.
The serum worked perfectly. The system failed him completely. That sentence is Level 5's true definition. Permanent transformation doesn't mean only the body changes. It means the old life closes behind you. Banner cannot return to being just a scientist. Bradley cannot recover 30 years. The experiment doesn't end when the injection does. Level 5 is the turning point on this ladder. Everything below it could theoretically be reversed. Level 5 is permanent, and permanent is where the MCU draws its darkest line. But Level 5 created something else too. It created a world that needed heroes to stop threats that science could no longer contain. And that need led directly to Level 6, not needles, not gamma rays, but a glowing blue cube that had been sitting in government storage for decades, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to turn it on. Level 6, Cosmic-Powered Experimentation. Everything in Levels 1 through 5 operated with needles, serums, and gamma chambers. Level 6 uses none of those things. It uses a glowing blue cube that had been sitting in government storage since 1945. The Tesseract, the Space Stone, one of 6 Infinity Stones. Howard Stark recovered it from the ocean floor while searching for Steve Rogers. He studied it for years and found something inside its energy signature that had no natural equivalent, a new element, clean and unlimited, capable of powering the world indefinitely. He couldn't build it. The technology of the 1970s wasn't sufficient to stabilize the reaction. So he encoded the solution into the layout of the Stark Expo.
The Stark Expo. Welcome.
The angles of the buildings, the geometry of the pathways, and left a recorded message for a son not yet old enough to understand. I built this for you. I'm limited by the technology of my time, but one day you'll figure this out. And when you do, you will change the world.
I built this for you. I'm limited by the technology of my time, but one day you'll figure this out. And when you do, you will change the world.
Tony Stark watched that footage on the 30th of May 2010. He was dying palladium poisoning from the arc reactor in his chest, destroying his blood. His father had been dead for 20 years. The answer was hidden in a theme park map. Pause here. A man in the 1970s studied an alien artifact, encoded clean energy into a theme park layout, and left it for a son he wouldn't live to see find it. That is not a science story. That is a father betting on a future he couldn't reach. Stark synthesized the new element in his workshop, inserted it into his chest, and lived. Meanwhile, a Kree scientist named Wendy Lawson had been working with Tesseract energy inside a U.S. Air Force research program, using its power to build a light-speed engine. In 1989, her plane was shot down. Lawson was killed. Test pilot Carol Danvers destroyed the engine to stop it falling into the wrong hands and absorbed the Tesseract's energy directly into her body. Carol Danvers became Captain Marvel, not through a serum, not through radiation, through direct exposure to an Infinity Stone. 3 outcomes from the same object. Howard Stark touched the Tesseract and found a new element. Wendy Lawson touched it and died. Carol Danvers touched it and became one of the most powerful beings in the universe. Level 6 is where the experiment stops being biology and becomes cosmology, and it asks one final question. What happens when the scientist doesn't just harness power at that scale, but becomes it? Level 7, God-level creation and evolution. Level 7 is where the scientist stops being human, not as a metaphor, literally. In Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, there is a moment where the High Evolutionary removes his own face on screen. Underneath is not skin. It is something barely recognizable as human. The experiment he ran on himself has reached its conclusion. Herbert Wyndham is gone. There is only the being that replaced him. In Volume 3, we see the full scale of what he built. Counter Earth, an entire planet populated with species he engineered from scratch. A world ship running parallel experiments across multiple generations. Rocket Raccoon and his companions, created as children on that world ship, given intelligence and awareness and the capacity to love, then scheduled for termination when they fell short of what he demanded.
It is. They want to kill us all in the morning. Oh. But I'm gonna fix it.
So here is the question. If you can evolve yourself into a god, and you can create an entire species from scratch, and nothing in the universe can stop you, what is left to want? What is left to fear? The High Evolutionary's answer, demonstrated in Volume 3, was nothing. He wanted perfection. When his creations fell short of that standard, he destroyed them and started again. An entire civilization, people with names and relationships and futures erased because the iteration hadn't produced the required result. That is the specific horror of Level 7. The High Evolutionary doesn't hate his creations. He simply doesn't place them in a category above draft. They are data points in an ongoing experiment. Data points that underperform get deleted. Guardians Volume 3 shows the full cost of that logic through Rocket, a child, given the ability to think, to feel, to build something resembling a family, then scheduled for disposal because the next model was ready. The scientist at Level 7 hasn't become cruel. He has evolved past the capacity to register the difference between creating a life and generating a result.
All right, P13, you win the crying contest. Now back in the cage.
Here is the line that connects all 7 levels. Erskine knew Steve Rogers by name. He chose him specifically. He cared what happened to him. The High Evolutionary, by the end, could not have told you Rocket's name before Rocket named himself. That distance between a scientist who knows his subject's name and one who has forgotten that names exist is not a measure of ambition. It is a measure of what gets lost when science scales without conscience. The problem was never the serum. It was never the gamma chamber, the cave, the tesseract, the world ship. The problem was always the man holding the needle. That is the question the MCU never fully answers.